Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Foreign Correspondence Club and welcome to the people on Zoom, the audience, and of course we have another audience because as you see we are still under COVID regime with big tables and a few people, and we are in a cage, in a glass cage. So we have forever, for eternity, a YouTube audience. Then some housekeeping rules. Please keep your mask on whenever you can, whenever you don't eat. That's an encouragement, but of course in Japan you know what an encouragement means. My name is Christoph Neidert, by the way. A very special welcome to Viktoriya Kim with the book The Politics of International Marriage. She's written it with two co-authors, Nelia Balgoa and Beverly Ann Yamamoto. The book is available at the reception for 4,400 yen. It's a scholarly book, so it's an expensive book, unfortunately. Dr. Kim has been an assistant professor at Osaka University until the end of last month. Now she's an associate professor. I once had to learn the difference, so that is a big step up, at Ritsumeikan in Kyoto. She holds a bachelor degree from Al-Farabi University in Kazakhstan. That's Kazakhstan State University, once the Kirov University in Almaty. That's a bachelor in East Asia Studies. And then she got a master's and a PhD in Osaka in sociology. Some people asked me before this event, how come a Korean, because Kim sounds Korean, from Kazakhstan? And I think I need to briefly explain that. According to the last Soviet census, there was about 500,000 Koreans in the Soviet Union. When I worked in the Soviet Union in the late 80s and then through the 90s and traveled to Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan or Sakhalin, we often met Koreans. We Westerners, we all know about the deportation of the Krim Tatars, the Crimea Tatars, the Volga Germans, the Chechens. Stalin deported them in 1937 to Kazakhstan. What most Westerners don't know, Stalin also deported 172,000 Koreans from the border area to Korea, also to Kazakhstan. And since the Soviet Union and South Korea didn't have any diplomatic relation, almost to the last minute of the existence of the Soviet Union, they didn't have any advocate, the Koreans in the Soviet Union. The 300,000 Koreans that lived in Sakhalin, they had nothing to do with Stalin. They have Japan to blame, the Japanese government, and they have it to blame twice. At the beginning of the war, there were 4,000 Koreans in Sakhalin. And then Japan thought to improve the population density, they would resettle Koreans from Japan to Sakhalin. Now, at the end of the war, when Japan evacuated from Sakhalin, Sakhalin was Japanese since the Russia-Japan war in 1905. When the Japanese resettled or evacuated from Sakhalin, they left the Koreans back because they were not subjects of the emperor anymore because the Japanese empire had collapsed. So those 300 Koreans were trapped in Sakhalin until the early 90s as stateless, most of them. Now to tonight's topic. When mixed marriage, cross-border marriage, or international marriage is all the same and always a bit different. When I was a small child, we discussed mixed marriages as mixed marriages between Catholic and Protestant. And the grown-ups said it's difficult because the Catholics, the Protestants had to convert to Catholicism to get married. In the United States, until I think 1967, mixed marriages were mixed race marriages. They were prohibited in many states in the South, in South Africa, until 1985. So the state always wants to meddle in. The marriage is not between two people, it's between two people and the state. It's not only Japan that regulates marriage. Actually, post-war Japan seems to be relatively open to, for example, the United States. But the Japanese state started very early. Tokugawa Japan in 1636 deported 287 mixed heritage children to Macau because they probably had a Portuguese father and a Japanese mother. And 11 to Batavia, Jakarta, the capital of Dutch East India. They probably had a Dutch father. During Sakoku, the Dutch and the Chinese traders in Nagasaki were the only foreigners in the country, and they had their little trading station. And the Tokugawa government didn't allow any women into Japan. One Dutch trader once brought his wife with him, and she had to go back with the next ship. I think she was not even allowed to leave the ship during its being anchored in Nagasaki harbor. But Tokugawa Japan provided those men, the Chinese and the Dutch, with women, with brides or with wives or temporary wives, either for one night, for longer, or for the whole period of their stay. They just had to pay. Actually, two Nagasaki brothels each had a monopoly. The one for the Dutch traders was called Hikidaya. The Europeans in the Dutch, or some not Dutch among the Dutch, seemed to be quite fine with that. Philipp Franz von Siebold, the German doctor, obtained many very special permissions nobody else could get. Like he had a little hospital outside the Dutch, say, ghetto now, but he didn't even make any attempt to bring his Japanese temporary wife and his daughter back to Europe when he left or had to leave. Reading Professor Kim's book, I understood that being internationally married is more complicated than I thought. Everybody in an international marriage is used to questions like, what language do your children speak? Or what food do you eat at home? I say 40% Chinese, 30% Japanese, 30% Western, and 100% mixed. Her book describes these spaces of negotiations every marriage has, but in international marriage, it's a multicultural space for negotiations. Tonight's book is a sociological study, a thorough sociological study. It is, as it should be, written in sociological language. However, it's still a much better read than many other sociological books. One to depict the complicated and multi-layered situation of international marriages, Professor Kim uses the metaphor of photography. So she makes a picture in landscape mode, long exposures, portrait mode, in aerial view, in time-lapse mode. This makes it much more approachable. And another reason, probably not the only one, is marriage is about people. It's about love, it's about attraction, it's about divorce, it's a topic too. So sometimes it's comical and sometimes it's very human. One woman from Russia says in her book, I'm sure there are wonderful men in Russia, I just never met one. Another one says, who comes from a very tall family, we have had, she married a Japanese man who was short, we have had enough basketball player in our family. And the Japanese husband says, Western women are too modern, Japanese women are too traditional, so this from the former Soviet Union, it's about right. While other intellectual Japanese men seem to be attracted to Russian literature's 19th century women when they marry women from the former Soviet Union. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. Okay, good evening. I will start. I have presentation, so I'll start sharing it. And yeah, so okay, so it is visible. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. I will be talking about some excerpts from the book and the stories that I've heard from people. And yes, later, if you would like to ask me more questions about some ideas that I discuss here, feel free to do that. So today I'll just introduce the book a bit and then discuss international marriage from academic perspective. Of course, I'm academic and it's inevitable to talk about it. And it's international marriage seems to be very, and marriage in general is like very private affair. But there are a lot of underlying issues that actually become public as well. And so I will touch upon this part. And then I'll just show some trends in Japan and how international marriages changed with time, love and choices, and conflicts and divorces. And just talk a bit about the future of international marriage studies. Well, first of all, why I decided to call it the politics of international marriage. First thing, the editor of the politics of marriage and gender, when he contacted me and he asked me to talk about politics of gender in Soviet Union, and I kind of felt that well, there is more politics in Japan in international marriages. So I asked him whether it's okay to talk about it, and he was like, "Yes, please. Like, we want to know about this too." So, and it was okay. So, what is it? What is the politics of international marriage? And so there are like, well, society is very complicated, right? And by calling it politics, I thought that we would have we would unravel that all the historical and governmental and cultural and interpersonal relationships that constantly happen between people. And even when we do not notice them, they still happen. And that's why it is politics. So that's in case if you wondered why it is the politics of international marriages. And another issue was that currently there are a lot of studies about international marriages. Some people just write from their own experience, and most of the studies are anthropological. And how it is different from sociology is that they usually start from the place where marriage migrants come from. And my interest was what is it, how are these couples affected when they live in Japan? Because the process, the moment of marriage is just like, let's say, a couple of years of dating and then marriage, but then there is very long process of living in the country. And so I was interested in the whole process of life in Japan. So that's why I put it in more sociological terms and in Japan's context. And most of the studies, of course, because we're researchers and we do like something that we can do, we access people that we can access. And of course, because I can speak Russian, I was speaking with Russian speaking women. But it's when we talk about these groups separately, it's okay. So, well, these are Russian-speaking women, these are Filipino women, these are American women, and so what? Like, what is it like? Everything is similar for everybody. So this book is different because we combine different studies together with two other researchers, and so we try to compare, we try to bring different perspectives of people from different countries. So in this sense, it's a new book. And we talked about different theoretical perspectives. Maybe it might be not that visible because we wanted it to be more accessible, more easy to understand. But we wanted to really focus on this idea of uchi and soto in Japan, and how people how people feel themselves within Japanese society and outside, and where these two meet, and how they affect their decisions to get married, where they live, how they educate their children, and so on and so forth. So these are like the ideas about the politics of international marriage. And here are just contents. It's where I start is what is cross-border marriage, what is international marriage, and then I go through kind of life of these people. So first of all, historical background of Japan, where these people are situated, what sort of environment they're in, and then why they choose each other, and what about love? Do they love each other, or how they perceive love, and how they negotiate their daily lives, or like important decisions and choices and they make, and constraints they have in their like integration, further integration, or like just settlement. And of course, raising bilingual and bicultural children is very important. And finally, we get to the divorce, because I communicate with many women for more than 15 years by now. And of course, there are divorces and there are a lot of conflicts. So this is reflected in throughout these chapters. And first thing is that when I ask students, why do you think people get married with foreigners? And they say, well, probably there is some economic underlying factors. And of course, researchers started from this point, but then they found out that it is not necessarily true, because when people why it's called paradoxical hypergamy, when people get married with somebody from let's say, especially it happens in the Filipino Japanese marriages, when they move from Philippines to Japan, they technically move to a more economically developed country, but it is not necessarily true that they will move into wealthier families. So because they might live like they might be from middle class in the Philippines, but when they come to Japan, they might be living with a person from working class, and they might earn more in Japan, but then it does not reflect their class in the Philippines. And so there is a lot of questions. Do they really get married for money, or whether there is hypergamy in their marriages? Of course, when it comes to economic differences between countries, it is, yes, it's hypergamy, but when it comes to individual persons class and how they are raised, how their lifestyle, and what sort of changes they have by moving in Japan, we find out that it is not necessarily moving up. They might be moving down. But again, there is a lot of, again, movements between countries, because once they start earning money in Japan, it might be low for uh, low level for Japan, but when they go to the Philippines back again, they're still rich there. So it's there are a lot of these paradoxical movements when people do this transnational kind of have these transnational connections and have these transnational movements. And of course, historical influences, as Christoph already introduced to you. We there was Japanese state controlled in many senses how foreigners will get married with Japanese and whether they will be allowed to get married in Japanese with Japanese. And the first mentioning of marriages starts in 1800s, 1850s, 1860s, when people like foreigners start asking Japanese government whether it is okay to get married with foreigners, with Japanese nationals for foreign nationals. And these are the first mentionings. But the largest number of international marriages actually starts after the Second World War. And we trace here the movement from war brides to rural brides to entertainment, mail order brides, and currently there is no really clear understanding of what sort of brides there are now, and I'll talk about it in a bit. And also immigration policies, they also affect how people actually will live with each other, how they will, whether they will be allowed to move to each other's countries. And of course, in Japan's case, it's immigration is very strict here. So there are a lot of constraints for couples. They have to prove that they're really in love marriage, they're really in real marriage, and the process of settlement. So these are the main questions how that are uncovered in this book. And well, just quickly, why I decided that it should be international marriage, not cross-border, not mixed marriage or intermarriage. It is international because it's not only two persons, it's different states that are involved in this marriage. That's why it is, rather than, like when we talk about cross-border, we are talking about just crossing border point. But when we talk about international, there is a lot of movements, there is a lot of kind of influences on these marriages. That's why they're international. And as I said, we analyze them from sociological perspective. So it's from immigration studies. In immigration studies, it's usually receiving countries' perspective. And the book contributes because we compare different groups. We gather different groups of people and we combine their experiences. So we could not go too much in depth because of that, but we could actually make an outline of how different groups settle in Japan. So I think this is the biggest contribution of this book. And well, I now move to the more kind of interesting part. These are the trends of international marriages. If you look at the top of this graph, it's all marriages in Japan and Japanese marriages in Japan. But at the bottom, you will see the development of the international marriages in Japan. And the calculation of those marriages starts in 1960s. So, and the first time they calculated them, it was 4,165 marriages, I think. And the majority, about 3,000, were between Japanese women and foreign men. But in 1980s, these numbers reversed. And if you look at that big spike between 2000 and 2006, there was a reason for this spike. And maybe you can guess, maybe you cannot. But so why it happened? Well, I usually ask students, why do you think it happened? But I'll tell you now. So there was a lot of entertainers coming to Japan. Maybe you have heard hostesses, those who entertain men when they come to the bars and they get paid for this. And there was a lot. The entertainers started coming to Japan in 1979. It's called Entertainers Year One, and by the 2000s there was like annually there was about 80,000, 100,000 women coming to Japan to work in entertainment industry. But at the same time, there was a huge problem of human trafficking worldwide, and US Department of State published this report on the human trafficking, and Japan was listed as a tier 2 country, meaning that tier 1 countries are the ones that successfully fight human trafficking. Tier 2 countries are the countries which become transit countries for traffickers and that support human trafficking. And one of the, in the report, entertainers were like one of the reasons why it was listed in tier 2. And since then, a lot of entertainers' visa were rejected. And at that point, a lot of women started actually getting married, like getting involved in marriage of convenience. And I also had a couple of women who confessed that they were, at some point, they were married with men for visa, and later they divorced and got married in proper marriages. So that's the spike. And when we talk about divorces, you will see another spike, and I'll explain why it happened again. So, and well, how many marriages are there? Overall, there are, so again, with marriage migrants, they have very interesting kind of status. If you are a foreign worker, like foreign workers, and Japan is basically usually positions itself as non-immigration country. But when it comes to marriage migrants, it is easier to migrate to Japan as a marriage migrant. Of course, you should meet certain conditions. And that also becomes an issue that I'll talk in a bit. And so it's quite complicated, and it's very difficult to calculate how many of the permanent residents in Japan are actually marriage migrants. And I assume that by now there is about 800,000 permanent residents. Among them, those who can receive permanent residence, if you are a spouse of Japanese national, you can receive it after 3-5 years of living in Japan. If you work in Japan, you can receive it after 10 years of working in Japan, right? So I assume there is like, well, about 60% of those who have permanent residence in Japan, they might be marriage migrants, former marriage migrants. And since my focus in on former Soviet Union, women from former Soviet Union, I mostly focused on Russian, Ukrainian, Belarusian, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and Kyrgyzstan women, because these are the countries that have the largest amount of women migrating outside. And well, again, calculations are very complicated. So I assume there is about 3,500, 4,000 female marriage migrants. And as you can see, Philippines have the largest number of marriage migrants, so about 100,000 of them. And yes, overall, currently there are 117,000 spouses who are on the visa of spouse of the Japanese national. So these are the numbers. And well, I'll talk a bit about the cases. I'll just introduce several citations, and then I'll explain what's going on here. So one of the women that I asked why she did not want to get married with men in her own country, she said, I'm not saying that all Russian men are the same, but I haven't seen a man that I can get married to. And most of them are alcohol or drug addicts, and they don't work. Even if they work, they don't spend their money for family, don't do any housework. They usually hang out with their friends and drink beer. They say they love children, but they never take care of them. I don't like their looks. They don't look healthy because of beer. Their faces are pale. I don't want to offend anybody, but I just don't like them. So that was her idea. Another person, and this also was kind of another commonly seen kind of opinion. So she explained why she moved overseas and got married with foreign men. So she said, my sister lives in Portugal. Her life in Russia was miserable. She divorced her husband and went to work in Portugal. I got married when I was 18. We lived together for 8 years and got divorced. The reason I divorced him was his attitude to me. He was abusing me. Our economic situation was unstable. He couldn't behave like father to our sons. I was thinking of going abroad, but I didn't know how to do this. I was lucky to find a way to go though. So she came to Japan as entertainer, actually. And another one, I don't know for sure, but I think I just didn't want to live in Russia. For instance, after living with me for, let's say, 15 years, there is a possibility that he can leave me for younger, more beautiful woman. They are also irresponsible fathers. I didn't know about Japanese men's attitude towards kids before marriage. I thought it depends on men, but I think this is one of our Russian men's characteristic. There are a lot of books in Russia about how to find a foreign husband. If I wasn't married, I would buy such book. So that was the idea. And in general, when I asked them, why did you marry a Japanese man? So that same girl from the first interview was, I wasn't that interested in money. I thought about creating a family and having children, and he was the one who could make my dream come true. And another person, he behaved like a gentleman and he looked very serious and responsible. And I also liked him. I thought I could rely on him and he could provide a family life for my son. And well, this is also another person who is talking about looks. I always liked Asian guys. I mean, black hair, black eyes, dark skin, and not too tall men. So somehow like height was very important there. And these are the ideas of men. And Takahiro, it was actually very interesting. I interviewed his wife first, and then I interviewed him. And when I asked his wife, why do you think he got married with you? And she was like, well, I don't know. And that's why I'm looking forward to hear from you what he says to you. And I was like, okay. So, and then I asked him and he says, well, Russian women like to have fun, but at the same time, they're very traditional and intelligent. So, and he added that American women are too emancipated. And Japanese women are too traditional, so, and Russians are 50-50. And when I explained it to her and she was like upset, she was, why didn't he just say that he loves me? And I was like, well, I don't know. So, and another person was also very interesting. He said, well, she didn't really know Japanese, so I couldn't really talk to her, but he preferred blondes. So the moment he saw like that there was a blonde woman in the hostess club where he usually went, he like, it was almost from the first week of her arrival to Japan, and for the 6 months he was courting her, and then in the end he traveled to Ukraine to get married with her. So, and well, another person was just saying, well, I can eat Russian food, and maybe like, and actually for him it was interesting being with a Russian wife. Was everybody was looking at him, so it was very interesting for him that people paid attention to him. And of course he was talking about his children and how they will become bilingual and they can go study abroad. So these are the reasons. And why I talk about these reasons is because when it comes to marriages, international marriages, there is an expectation from the immigration police, immigration officers, that they will have this sort of romantic relationship. Let's say when it's Japanese marriages or Russian marriages, nobody really cares what are the reasons why people get married with each other. But when it comes to international marriages, they have to prove that they love each other in this romantic way. So and why I started really looking into this, because one of the couple's husband was 20 years older than his wife, and when they went to Russian embassy to apply for spouse visa, they told him, are you trying to traffic her into Japan, to sell her into prostitution? And he was very shocked that he was asked about this. And another thing that when immigration officers suspect that the marriage is not really right, they interview spouses and they interview them separately. And they ask them very interesting questions. Let's say, which side of the bed does your husband sleep on? And the spouses have to give like proper responses because they're later checked. Or they ask, what is the brand of your TV? Or like, when is the garbage day? And I think in the advertisement there was this question, what is the color of your husband's underwear today? And a lot of women who were married and who were in proper marriages, they said, well, I don't know, like how do I know this? So, and it was very interesting to hear this from women, that they had to go, like, they have to go jump through all these bureaucratic hoops to prove that they're in really living marriage with each other. And yes, so why do they live in Japan? We decided to split our participants in 4 groups. So those ones who wanted to get married with foreigners, and they were looking for such people, or they had very long experience of living overseas, that's why they did not feel comfortable, or they were more exposed to foreigners rather than to Japanese. And we had this group, 2 groups who were living in Japan, and they met in Japan accidentally, or they were intentionally looking for a foreign person inside Japan. And so based on this, on how people, what people decided for their marriages, their marriages were like really organized very differently. But it doesn't mean that if they were more open-minded about foreigners when they got married, it doesn't mean that it did continue in the same way. So because we had our interviewees participating in the study for many years, we saw the differences, how their ideas were changing, and how once they start settling in Japan, once they have more kind of ideas about Japan and how to live here, they start changing their ideas on how their marriage should be. So it was interesting. So from the beginning, it was this idea, okay, I want to get married with foreigner, or I met him or her accidentally, and to more kind of elaborated strategies later on in their married life. So these are the ideas that we discuss in 2 chapters. And yes, so as I already mentioned, foreign nationals who come to Japan as marriage migrants, they have this kind of ambiguous status because they're kind of welcome, but at the same time, their areas of action are pretty limited, especially when it comes to foreign women. Usually, foreign men are expected to have career in Japan, and they would push through for this career. But foreign women, they expected to fill in the roles that Japanese women did not want to fill in, or that do the same role as Japanese women do. And it was not in my book, but in another book, it was said that some women, Filipino women who were living in the countryside, Japan, they were saying, well, we are more Japanese than Japanese women, but we are still seen as foreigners. And there is this expectation from for Asian women to know more about Japan rather than there is no such expectation toward Russian women. They never like kind of express. They usually would say, well, that's my way and I'm doing this way. And when it comes to Filipino women, they do not really always have this choice to say what is their way. And because of their ambiguous status, their whole settlement in Japan is left to spouses and to relatives. And what happens is that they do not really have networks with other foreigners. They do not know much about like how to survive, how to like what sort of networks there are, because they're put under the kind of supervision of the Japanese family. And that actually, on one hand, it is good because they learn language, they learn about customs and like how to live in Japan like Japanese people. But at the same time, it creates a lot of vulnerabilities for them because they're not aware of many issues. And when I talk about divorce, that's what happening with some women when they do not have networks, when they do not know about some threats within their marriages, they are actually left alone on their own. And yeah, so that's where like their status, this sort of marital citizenship of marriage migrants is good and bad at the same time. And again, it also there is also an issue of labor because recently I'm interested more in integration of these migrants and looking into how their lives get better with the knowledge of Japanese language and with their like attempts to get into Japanese society. And what I noticed is that those women who like intentionally learn Japanese language and try to get out and have more connections are more adapted to life in Japan, but the majority are still like they kind of constantly live in this housewife mode. And when troubles happen, they become like they're the most vulnerable group. They become the most vulnerable group, and their children become very vulnerable. So and yeah, so these are the ideas that I'm going to with conflicts and divorces. So here are the number of divorces in general in Japan. And even though like there are a lot more Japanese divorces between Japanese spouses, endogamous Japanese marriages, you can see that there is this spike of divorces between 2009 and 2012. So this is related to that spike of marriages between 2000 and 2005, because as I said, once people get married, after 3 or 5 years in marriage, they can receive permanent residence and stay in Japan. So that's where the spike went up, where all these paper marriages got destroyed. And yeah, so that's very interesting about these numbers. But of course, I'm not saying that all the marriages that were, all the couples that divorced in this time were paper marriages, but I assume that there was a lot of contribution of such marriages. And this is general, we know information about international divorces from 1992. And as you can see, the number of divorces is pretty high among international marriages, especially when it comes to the Japanese men, foreign women marriages. So every 3 marriages out of 4 marriages end up in divorces when it comes to Japanese men. And when it comes to Japanese women, foreign men marriages, about half of them end up in divorce. So these are the numbers. And who are divorced couples from my perspective? Well, in sociology, it's generally known that usually women tend to initiate divorce. Same was for international marriages. About 75% of marriages were divorces were initiated by women, and couples with large age difference. I didn't really talk about it much, but most of the marriages, when it's Japanese man, foreign woman marriages, they have very high, large age difference. And for Russian women, the largest difference I saw was 33 years age difference. But my co-author who studied Filipino women, there were marriages where the couple had 40 years age difference. And yes, so those marriages tend to end up in divorces. And also, if divorced women had experience of working as hostesses in Japan, some of them would return back to hostess industry to get married, to remarry, to find other men and remarry. So about half of the women that divorced among Russian women ended up going back and finding another partner. So that's the trends. And these are some attitudes from Russian women. What I saw, well, when I say Russian women, I mean Russian-speaking women. There are three types of them. Somebody say, if my marriage doesn't work, I will divorce while I'm young and can easily find another partner. And so some people say there are many people in my country who divorce, and my parents are also divorced, so it is all right to divorce to find a better partner. So they see divorce as a possibility. And for some women, divorce is not an option. So one of the persons who was not happy about her marriage, but she said, well, I will not find a better father for my child, so I'll stick to this man. And for some couples, especially when there are businesses and money involved, it becomes too complicated. So I actually have this part that I wanted to read. So what she said is, her husband, used to say that children were too small. That is why he did not want to divorce, but they're not that small anymore. I know that the real reason is that some of his company's assets are registered in my name. It is so complicated that no lawyer wants to deal with our case. So my husband doesn't do anything bad to us. He doesn't kick us out of the house. That is why we keep living together. To say the truth, I want to go back to Russia. I'm not that old yet, but I'm already 36. Even if I want to keep studying, I cannot do this since I'm busy with children. My friends back home keep learning new things, work in good companies, and get good pay. I could do this too, but I cannot take my children from here to go to Russia. And I cannot think of leaving them here and going alone to Russia, even when they get older. I'd like to realize my potential while I have a chance, but it is difficult to do without Japanese language and without studying in Japanese school. So it feels like I'm in a haze. So that was that actually all the women become the older their children become, they actually start feeling a lot like this. And this woman was, she was older than most of the women that I interviewed. She was already in her 30s when I started my research. And the more I look into this women's lives, the more I see that they kind of start having second thoughts about their international marriage. And so final topic, what's happening when they divorce. First of all, Japan has very interesting divorce procedure. Some women may find themselves divorced without knowing that they were divorced, and nothing can happen. And a lot of those issues are discussed among women in the online networks these days, so they're more aware. And most recently, I saw that immigration officers started distributing this information in Russian language as well, that please be careful, you might be already divorced without really knowing this. Because divorce is actually very simple in Japan. You go, you put your stamp, and stamp can be bought in the 100 yen shop, and that's it. Before researchers know this, but not all the women know this. And every month I see one woman saying, hey, how do you call this paper? I want to go to City Hall and sign it so my husband cannot divorce me without me knowing this. And as I said, usually when it comes to divorce, it becomes downward social mobility for women, because when they divorce, they were not working all this time. They usually can speak, they usually learn language as their children grow up. And at the point when children stop talking to them, the Japanese language also stops. And if they do not learn it intentionally, they can do only low paid works. And that's where divorce actually makes their lives even worse. And when COVID happened, some women were saying, I work 3 jobs and I cannot really, I don't really know how to survive on this money because it is not enough. And again, probably one of the biggest issue is custody in Japan. So one of my participants, she thought that she had this assumption, like we do in former Soviet countries, that father will be coming for weekend, keeping children, and returning them after the weekend is over. So what happened is, one of the weekends, her ex-husband takes the child and never returns the child back home. So, and I will not really explain much. I think we don't have enough time here, but there was a long battle between them. So they got back together and she was hiding the child. In the end, she even changed the child's family name so the husband cannot find the child. And same happens with, Japanese men, foreign women, foreign men, Japanese women cases. And probably you have heard about Vincent Fischot case most recently. And that was similar to what was happening with Russian women. And well, we do not really advocate for these women's and for their choices. What is the biggest problem here is that the absence of joint or shared custody. And for many women, it is for Russian-speaking women, it is usually given that women will be taking care of their child and men will be just visiting them, and that's how they will peacefully kind of go apart with their ex-husbands. But it is not happening in Japan, and that becomes very hard thing to discuss with them. And most recently, I had this round table where this Russian woman who is fighting to see her child, to actually get custody over her child. And she said she spent enormous amounts of money, but she doesn't really think that she will be ever able to live with her child. So it's very sad. And yes, so this is the because of this whole situation of absence of joint custody or absence of financial protection, women start planning their divorces long before they actually divorce. And there are a lot of strategies at play, and they're trying, they're going through different cases, they discuss different cases and find optimal decisions when it comes to divorce and custody. So yes, and a final topic, what is the future of marriage migration studies? We tend to, when it comes to Japan, we tend to speak only about heterosexual marriages, but these days, and we talk about, let's say we used to talk about war brides and then rural brides and then hostess, entertainment brides. And these days, there are more international students coming to Japan. There is more online ways of meeting foreign partners. So I think there will be a lot of new types of marriages, and also, of course, homosexual marriages will probably become more visible. And integration issues are not really covered that much. As I said, will life longer than the process of getting married. So, and I think that that is also another new field that will be important from now on. And of course, path of mixed heritage children. I didn't have time to talk about this today, but it's very interesting to see how they learn different languages, how they associate themselves with different nationalities. So yes, this is pretty much it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that very interesting talk. To the last point, the multicultural issue and the integration, that's actually what you are working on right now. I didn't say that before. And as well as that, you're working on the deportation of 1937 of Koreans. So that will be interesting to read about that. We now come to the question and answer session part. We have questions from online and questions from here in the hall. For the questions here, please come to the microphone and introduce yourself, please. Who is first? Then I ask you something. Foreign spouses coming to Japan, and they are getting influenced by Japanese society, by the state, by the neighbors, but they do influence Japan too. Maybe you want to speak a bit about how they change Japan. I mean, especially by networking, they really give the Russians have, or the Russian speaking, we should not say Russians, the Russian speaking Japanese, Russian speaking women of Japanese men, they are very well connected, I think.
So I think one of the ways that they influence Japan is, well, first, their visibility. But at the same time, while they're visible, and it's very interesting about Russian women, because a lot of people who meet them, they think that they're American or like Europeans and they speak English. So in this sense, they have this privilege of having this privilege, white privilege, I guess. And that is not something that Filipino women would experience. But at the same time, I think they, when it comes to women, they actually learn Japanese ways, and they, what I constantly see on our network, Russian-speaking network for women, they usually would say, so I have this problem. If I go Russian way, I will do this. How do I do this in Japanese way? And everybody else is teaching them. So I think they're kind of getting more separated from Japanese society because there is a lack of opportunities for them to actually get out and like show themselves what they do. And there is a lot of activity within these ethnic groups. And that's where the problem of integration actually is happening, because the more they get into their ethnic groups, the more they have loose connections with local people. And even when they say, well, women at work, if they do part-time work, Japanese women at work said this, my Russian friends said this, and they choose which one they want to be. They want to go Russian way or Japanese way. So I kind of feel that it is still far ahead when they can actually start influencing Japanese society. But their children are more visible. And it's another problem for many of them, because Russian language is not as important as English. And when it comes to some women, one of the women was complaining because her child said, well, I'm Japanese and he looks blonde. He doesn't really look Japanese much. And she said, well, I'm Russian. He said, well, you can be Russian, but I'm Japanese. And so they usually they become passive bilinguals. And if women insist on their learning of Russian language, for them it's, well, it's useless language. Why do I have to study it? Japanese is enough. So, and I think this is still like for Russian speaking women in particular, it's a bit far to actually start influencing Japanese society.
In a Russian-speaking culture, it's said that the woman is kind of governing the household. I mean, in Russian cities, they used to say the husband doesn't even have a space in the apartment, while in Japan, according to Japanese law, of course, the husband is the head of the house. And that's a problem in a divorce, because then the woman is without a head of a house. But before, when they don't divorce, do non-Japanese wives kind of change the power structure in the marriage?
That's actually, when we talked about this uchi soto idea, who choose whom and for what reasons, one of the interesting part was when it comes to the household and household management, women usually were the ones who would decide how the household would be arranged. So when it's Russian women, it's there is more like Russian customs, Russian ways of doing things. When it's Japanese women, foreign men couples, it's more like Japanese way of organizing household. But when it comes to the food, women usually say that Japanese do not like Russian food and they cannot really cook for themselves only. So they cook for themselves only for like New Year or some big holidays. And the rest of the family has to eat, like, let's say when it's New Year, it's osetiori, and women just have their own Russian, like typical Russian food. The other day, actually, at the New Year, everybody on Facebook was posting what sort of food they have, and every woman had one this salad called Olivier. It's like it's potato. It's Russian salad. It's called Russian salad in Spain, I think. It's called potato salad in France. It has different names, but it's usually this potato, a lot of carbs, a lot of eggs, and a lot of mayonnaise there. But every woman had that salad on their table. So and that was very interesting. But when it comes to the differences between Japanese women, Filipino women, and Russian women, what I saw is that Russian women, they would welcome guests in a very Russian way. So if I was visiting them, they would be very upset if I didn't stay overnight. That's what friends are supposed to do. And I had, when I was coming to collect interviews in Tokyo, I had to stay at one house every night, at each house every night, because they expected me to stay there. But when we talked about it with my co-authors, actually Filipino women were meeting only in the public places, and their husbands would not allow them to like to meet if the researcher was like male. So they would check if the researcher was female, and then they would be allowed to meet. So that was also very interesting how they distributed the distribution of power in the household between different ethnicities.
Anybody question? Yes, Martin, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kim, for your very impressive lecture.
Thank you.
You mentioned the importance of children in international marriage, and you mentioned them in a context that children keeps international marriages rather together than divorce. When I talked to a German lawyer who is specialized in divorces, he said to me the very opposite, at least in the case of German-Japanese couples. He said that education, the difference of education between Japanese and German is so different that, in fact, this is a major reason, or the biggest proportion of the divorces between Japanese and German. Of course, I have no statistical evidence for that, no? But yeah, I just wanted to mention it, and if you could give some comment on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, it's when it comes to Russian Japanese marriages, um, I hear Russian Soviet education was very hard, and I remember how we studied at school. We had a lot of homework, and I think being from that sort of culture, a lot of Russian women complain that, well, they just prepare for undokai all the time. And then it's one undokai, and then there is another undokai. So they cannot even get through their textbooks are so thin, and they cannot even get through this textbook through the year. Like, what are they doing there? So I think that was one of the complicated issues. But I discussed this in actually education chapter, education of children's chapter. For Russian women, when it comes to education, they have to decide whether they want their children to study in Russia or in Japan, and the answer is usually Japan, because they say, well, my child is Japanese, they have to go to Japanese school, and that's where they belong. And I saw a couple of women who tried to go through distance learning, Russian distance learning, and they said we can go only through elementary school, like 3-4 years, and then it becomes too hard to catch up. So what happens is that children go to regular Japanese schools. It is also very convenient for mothers, because they say we learn language with children, and when children are too small, they say we have baby Japanese language. Once children start going to school, start using harder words, they learn them, and so that's how children become more monolingual and women become more bilingual at the same time. But at some point, children catch up and they become passive bilinguals, from what I see in many couples, if they decide to do this. And another issue that there is that children also have to catch up with English, and it's not that there is conflict. It's some couples, they just overload their children, and one of the couples that I was looking at for a long period of time, they had their child who was 2 years old. She was not that communicative and was not really speaking Japanese, and her mother didn't really understand whether she understands her Russian. And so their decision was to put her into English school. And I don't know what was the logic there, but so they said, well, she's not social. Yeah, so to this day, it's a kind of mystery. But also, I think, back to your question, there is no really conflict about how to educate them. There is conflict about catching up with assignments, and because I saw some of the couples, they were waiting for fathers to come back home so they can help, because mother cannot read or cannot understand what's going on, and she doesn't know these assignments. So that was the hardest bit for them.
You have one case in the book of an American father who gets angry that the Japanese mother is far too permissive. The child can watch too much TV. And I think from the German-speaking community, we know such cases where actually it went to divorce because the father wanted to have a strict education while the mother was just permissive.
I think there was a case when when the Japanese father was saying to the child, well, if you do this, I'll do this in exchange. And she was, this is not trade, this is education. You have to do this. So that was the case, and she was trying to go like in a very forceful way. And then her child really hated Russian language, so he refused to study it. I don't know what happened next, but yeah, so in that case, I think I don't see any differences in terms of education, because I think many women, they just take this education into their hands, at least the studying process, but then when it comes to homework, they cannot really do much.
I have an online question by Ilgin Yorulmas. I think she is with the Turkish language BBC, please.
Hello. Hello there. Hi,
Hi.
Dr. Kim, and thank you, Christoph. Yes, this is Ilgin Yorulmaz. I'm a reporter for BBC World Turkish, and thank you so much for this very interesting presentation. Just a couple of maybe comments before I ask my two questions. My sister-in-law, who lives in London, is an Indian woman, and so I kind of understand very well the dynamics of international marriage from a broader family perspective, not between these two people, but also between two families, two cultures. So your observations are very interesting. I just want to ask you if you have actually noticed in your research any pressure being put on Japanese women by their foreign husbands to change their maybe religion or to behave according to this husband's ethnic and religious culture. So that's my one question. And if I may also ask another one, how can Japanese governments help these foreign spouses to be better integrated into the society so that they don't have to divorce and go out, find another man? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the question about religion, we didn't really study many different religious groups. So I'm not really sure about, let's say, Muslim men and Japanese women. From American or Western couples, Japanese women couples, there was no question of religion much, but there was actually, I thought about this, it was very interesting when many Russian-speaking women are from Russian Orthodox Church, and when they get married, and if they decide to get married in church, men have to become Orthodox. And in Japan, Orthodox Church is apparently quite strict. So if you want to become Orthodox, you have to attend several lectures before you become like in back home, you just go, you apply, and you become Orthodox, right? Here it's more complicated, but a lot of Japanese men actually willing to go through this procedure for women and to get married. But because it's quite loose, we usually celebrate Easter, and that's pretty much it, and Christmas, I guess. So even though the couple gets married in the church, Orthodox church, it doesn't mean that there is a lot of kind of pressure to follow the religion inside the household. But for Filipino-Japanese marriages, what was interesting is that church becomes a third space where women can actually exercise their own culture and their own religion freely, and that's where like they can express themselves because they're more constrained in their households, and they usually would go to the church and they would kind of bring children. So it's like it's a space where they find kind of like this comfortable space for them to live. So that's about the religion question. And I'm sorry, I forgot the second one.
Can you repeat the second question, Ilgin Yolmaz?
Yes, now I can.
Oh.
Yes, my other question was, how can the Japanese government help these foreign spouses? Yeah.
Thank you. So how they can help. First of all, it's information and it's programs for foreigners to integrate. For it's not only for like all foreigners, but spouses to integrate. So what's happening in Japan currently is Japan implemented this Tabunka Kyosei, it's multicultural community building in Japan. And the idea here is to for women, for like inclusive society, diverse and inclusive society, where different groups of people, including Japanese people, will be kind of living in these multicultural communities. And most of the programs still oriented on the language learning. And when it comes to language learning, it's very basic. It's very kind of, you study with volunteers, you do not study with professionals. So it's more like daily Japanese. And many foreigners, they like this format because for some of them, Japanese language is not that important. But at the same time, because these courses, they're not kind of popularized, the information about them, you get it only when you go to the city hall to register yourself, and you get a pile of papers. And in this pile of papers, there is information on courses. And if you do not really know about the existence, about what they're doing, you will not really be interested in them, or like you will not feel comfortable going there. And so as Korea, they followed Japan in many ways, but then they went away from this idea of multicultural community. They kind of started this foreign marriage migrant programs, and they re-educate them, they give them better conditions for like getting citizenship, getting permanent residence in Korea, if people study Korean language, if they have good Korean language skills. And there is no such incentives in Japan. So, and because of this lack of incentives, lack of information, it's very hard. But because everything is left to the Japanese spouse, and Japanese spouse is not foreigner, they do not know how it is to be foreigner in Japan, and they cannot socialize in the same way. So I think it should be less really left to the family, but more to these public organizations that distribute this information and work with them.
Anybody a last question? Otherwise, yes, please, Khaldun.
Thank you very much for your insights on this very complicated, impossible situation about marriage. My name is Khaldun Azhari. I'm a correspondent for Panoramic News. I just want to tell you what I heard from my most male friends who divorced their Japanese wives. I don't take their position. I'm just hearing most reasons. They say we can't be friends. Like foreign man and a Japanese wife, they couldn't be friends. It's just like an institutional marriage. And they said the Japanese wife love rules. There's rules for everything, even how to put the dish on the table. There are rules for that. And one friend, he liked to play with the dishes, and his wife became very angry, and she told him, this is holy things. You eat food here, so you should respect it. Don't play with the dish. And that was one main reason why they had so many fightings about such rules. And the most other important reason, he said, after we had the kids, she lost her interest in me sexually. And I heard this really many times. So what do you think the main reason through your research about the divorce between foreign men and Japanese women? And this is for all foreign men, not certain nationality. And what advice you tell men before they marry Japanese so they don't get into divorce? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so among couples that we interviewed, Western couples, there were American, British, Australian couples. There was only one divorce, and it was for health reasons. The husband had to return to his home country for the health, because of the health issues. So yes, I constantly hear about sexual life issues, and it's actually not only Japanese woman, foreign men couples, it's also Japanese men, foreign women couples. I had one of the persons who said, well, I had to cry when we, before we got married, we had sex twice. And then after we got married, in order to get pregnant, I had to cry so to make him have sex with me. So, and then the moment they had the child, it stopped completely. For another couple, it was, she said, well, we had sex twice in 5 years. And when I say that we don't have it enough, he says, well, we had sex in the twice in the 5 years. So it's what's wrong with that? That's actually also one of the reasons some women choose to divorce. And yes, I'm sorry, but I don't really know what sort of advice I can give. I have a friend who is Japanese, who got married with a foreign man, and they said, can you please just promise me you will not reject having sex with him? And she said, well, I'll try, I'll do my best. So that was the only way for me to influence that. But yeah, I think it's one of the complicated issues.
I think that's a nice topic to end on. Please give Viktoriya Kim a very big hand, and thank you very much. As a token of our appreciation, you get a 1-year free membership.
Thank you.
And as I said before, the book is available at the reception for 4,400 yen. I unfortunately don't have the time on the date of our next book break. So thank you very much for coming, and thank you very much for the people online.